You know what's killing your progress? It's not your genetics. It's not your schedule. It's not the circumstances. It's your mouth. You talk too much. You hype up your goals, tweet your dreams, post your intentions, and act like the declaration alone does the work. It doesn't. Execution does. Everyone wants to be a beast until it's time to put in the reps when no one's watching. And that's the difference. The 1% build, the 99% broadcast. Most people aren't addicted to progress. They're addicted to attention. They don't really want to transform their lives. They just want others to believe they will. That's why they post declarations about their goals before they've even taken the first step. That's why they announce every diet, every challenge, every new chapter on social media. They're chasing applause for ideas, not results. And that's the problem. Verbal validation becomes a substitute for real achievement. Just talking about your ambition gives you the illusion that you're already moving, but you're not. You're standing still, feeding your ego while your potential starves. Verbal validation is a trap disguised as momentum. It feels good to say, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm starting a business, or I'm changing my life. That sentence tricks your brain into thinking something meaningful just happened. You felt brave. You got praise. Maybe someone commented with clapping emojis. That felt like forward motion, but nothing moved. Nothing changed. You didn't wake up earlier. You didn't sacrifice comfort. You didn't bleed for it. You just opened your mouth and got high off your own noise. That's not hustle. That's performance art. This is why most people fail. They get addicted to that feeling. They crave the emotional spike of making bold claims. They've convinced themselves that saying it is half the battle. It's not. In fact, saying it publicly without backing it up can make it worse. The more you talk about your goals without taking action, the more your identity becomes tied to empty promises. You become that person who's always trying, who's always about to start, who's working on it. You repeat it so much, it becomes your truth, even though nothing's actually changed. And let's be real, most people around you don't expect you to follow through anyway. They're used to it. They've heard your speeches before. They've seen the cycles. They don't take your words seriously. And deep down, neither do you. But that doesn't stop you. You keep announcing because the praise feels real, because the likes are instant, because people say you got this. And for a second, you believe them. But belief without behavior is worthless. No one becomes elite by making declarations. They become elite by shutting up and doing the damn work when no one's looking. The people who win aren't talking about what they're going to do. They're already doing it. They're waking up when you're still snoozing. They're in the gym while you're writing captions. They're stacking results in silence while you're fishing for attention. That's why they win. Not because they're lucky, not because they're gifted, but because they understand that progress is earned in isolation, not announced in public. The truth is, if you were serious about your goals, you wouldn't need to talk about them so much. You wouldn't have time to talk about them. You'd be too busy in the grind, too buried in the process, too deep in the suck to bother convincing others. That's the difference. The 1% don't need external validation. Their work speaks for itself. Their actions tell the story. And it's a story written in discipline, not words. But the 99%, they stay stuck in cycles. They keep making grand declarations. They keep building this fake momentum, hyping themselves up in public, but failing in private. Because when the cameras are off, when the motivation fades, when it's just them and the pain of actual effort, they fold. They go back to comfort. They start making excuses. And then they look for another way to feel like they're doing something. So they talk again. It's a loop, a loud, empty, exhausting loop. Verbal validation is like sugar. It gives you a quick rush, but no substance. It doesn't build anything. It doesn't make you stronger. It just feeds your ego. And egos don't lift weight. Egos don't run miles. Egos don't build businesses. Egos talk. Champions build. And building is slow. Building is painful. Building requires silence and sacrifice and a willingness to be invisible for a long time. Most people can't handle that. They want immediate praise, but greatness doesn't give you feedback in the early stages. It doesn't pat you on the back. It tests you. It starves you. It dares you to keep going without applause. If you need people to cheer for you every time you make a decision, you'll never last. Because most of the grind is thankless. No one's clapping when you turn down cake. No one's celebrating when you drag yourself to the gym at 5 a.m. No one's posting about the nights you choose work over sleep, discomfort over ease, structure over spontaneity. That's the real battlefield. That's where your future is being shaped, and no one sees it. But you have to do it anyway. You don't get strong from speaking. You get strong from suffering, from being the only one holding the line when everyone else is relaxing, from showing up again and again with no one watching, from being consistent, not just loud. That's where real change happens, not in the declaration, but in the execution. In the boring, brutal, disciplined execution that separates the committed from the curious. You don't need to announce your goals. You need to become the person who hits them. Quietly, relentlessly, without applause, without recognition. You need to get addicted to doing, not declaring, because no one remembers what you said you were going to do. They remember what you actually did. No one cares about your promises. They care about your performance. That's what matters. That's what lasts. So if you're serious, stop talking. Start earning. Let your actions become so undeniable that people are shocked into silence. Let your discipline be louder than your mouth. Let your results slap the doubt off people's faces. Let your grind make your words irrelevant. Because once you start truly executing, you won't need to convince anyone. They'll see it, they'll feel it, and most of them won't understand how you did it. Because they were too busy talking when they should have been working. You already know what needs to happen. You don't need more motivational quotes. You don't need to get inspired. You need to get ruthless. You need to cut off the addiction to verbal validation like a tumor. You need to starve your ego and feed your execution. You need to stop making noise and start making moves, because every second you spend talking about what you might do is a second lost from actually doing it. And that time adds up. One day you'll look back and realize you wasted years pretending to be the person you could have just become. You can't fake your way into the 1%. You can't charm your way into results. You have to earn it with sweat, with pain, with patience, with relentless, uncomfortable, inconvenient action. And none of that requires a single word. Just commitment, just effort, just grit. Let the 99% keep talking. Let them announce. Let them recycle the same empty promises year after year. You shut up and work. Build something so real it speaks for itself. And when they ask how you did it, just smile, because they'll never understand. They were too busy talking, you were too busy building. They were too busy building excuses around labels they hadn't lived up to. That's the real epidemic, fake self-definition. Everyone wants to be seen as something great before they've endured anything difficult. They paste motivational identities onto themselves like stickers, hoping the world will believe it, hoping they might eventually believe it too. But deep down, they know. They know when it's hollow. They know when they haven't earned it. Wearing a label without sacrifice is a costume, not a commitment. And every time they pretend, it becomes easier to live in that delusion. Call yourself disciplined without structure, and it becomes a lie. Call yourself resilient without enduring hardship, and it becomes a lie. Call yourself dedicated without daily proof, and it becomes a lie. Identity isn't declared, it's revealed through repetition, suffering, resistance, and the relentless refusal to retreat. Those who actually become something never have to say it. The way they live makes it undeniable. But when there's nothing underneath the words, no routine, no struggle, no consistency, the titles collapse the moment life pushes back. The moment something inconvenient shows up, a cold morning, a missed night of sleep, an unexpected problem, they fold. That's because the identity wasn't built. It was borrowed. And borrowed confidence gets repossessed when pressure rises. Real self-respect is forged by walking through fire, not just talking about it, by doing when quitting looks easier, by showing up when everything inside screams for comfort. And that's where the imposters disappear, when the conditions no longer match their imagination. They love the fantasy They love the visual of themselves becoming this unbreakable, unstoppable version, but they don't love the friction required to become it. Because friction doesn't feel good. It humiliates. It exposes gaps. It reveals just how far you really are from who you think you are. But that's where the opportunity lives. In facing that truth, without running from it, without hiding behind hashtags or mantras or empty affirmations, that's where the real work begins. When you've built nothing real, all you have is performance. A performance of effort, a performance of drive, a performance of transformation. But performance doesn't equal progress. You can't mimic growth. You can only manifest it through repetition, through early alarms, not loud alarms, through failed reps, not filmed reps, through thousands of unseen decisions that shape who you really are when nobody's watching. That's identity. That's discipline. That's commitment. And that's why most never make it, because it's boring, it's brutal, and it offers no immediate reward. The world is full of people calling themselves relentless, but folding at the first sign of inconvenience. The world is full of people claiming they're obsessed, but still negotiating with themselves every single day. They act tough when it's easy, but softness comes the moment discomfort arrives. That's what happens when there's no anchor underneath the words. They drift. They abandon their promises because the promises were performative from the start. If your identity isn't built on discomfort, it's fiction. You only know who you are when everything is against you. You only know what you're made of when you're forced to act without applause, when the path is uphill, when nothing about the situation is convenient or glamorous. That's when the truth hits. That's when you either become it or you go back to pretending. That's when all the declarations become irrelevant, because now it's about whether or not you'll endure what your ego claimed you were built for. There's no shame in being at the beginning. There's only shame in faking that you're not. Pretending you've arrived before you've even begun is the fastest way to guarantee you never will. You have to be real enough to admit what you haven't done. You have to be strong enough to own your gaps and relentless enough to close them through action. No identity worth having is handed to you because you claimed it. Is built one grueling, silent, unsexy step at a time. If your daily reality doesn't reflect what you say about yourself, then what you're building is a fantasy. If your behavior contradicts your label, then the label is meaningless. You can't call yourself disciplined while skipping structure. You can't say you're focused while drowning in distraction. You can't identify as driven when your actions are defined by delay, hesitation, avoidance. That's not identity. That's illusion. Stop hiding behind phrases. Stop borrowing words from those who've actually earned them. Start building from zero. You'll gain more power from honest beginnings than fake declarations, because once you earn the identity through proof, you'll never need to say it again. The way you move will confirm it. The way you respond when nobody's pushing you will confirm it. The way you rise when every excuse feels justified will confirm it. That's the difference. That's where real transformation begins. In truth, not in titles. Nothing extraordinary is possible while you're still lying to yourself about who you are. You say you're a machine, but your habits are inconsistent. You say you're a savage, but your routine is soft. You say you're built different, but you crumble under basic expectations. Who you think you are means nothing. Who you prove you are, daily, without reminders or recognition, that's the only version that counts. You can trick people with image. You can't trick results. You can't Photoshop strength. You can't fake reps. You can't out-talk reality. It only responds to one thing: what you actually do. If your output is weak, your identity is hollow. If your systems are sloppy, your title is a fantasy. And the longer you live in that fantasy, the further you fall behind those who are building something real. When it's hard, most people return to what they've always done. They search for comforting language to justify quitting. They start labeling themselves as burned out or overtrained or mentally exhausted, not because it's accurate, but because it lets them off the hook. They use language to escape instead of using discipline to evolve. They weaponize identity to protect fragility instead of using action to replace weakness. That's how the average stay average. But if you're really about becoming something more, you have to make your choices louder than your descriptions. Don't say you're hungry, show it by what you sacrifice. Don't say you're focused, show it by what you eliminate. Don't say you're dedicated, show it by your consistency in the dark. Prove everything through behavior. Let repetition write your identity in blood and effort. Nobody ever earned power by describing themselves. They earned it by doing the things that most people can't tolerate. Early alarms, missed comforts, painful discipline, ruthless decisions, radical accountability. That's what builds identity. The kind no one can take away because it wasn't borrowed. It was forged. It was bled for. It was proven beyond doubt in moments of complete isolation when nothing made sense except the vision you refused to abandon. The people who actually make it never had to say they were great. The work made it obvious. Their lives, their routines, their outcomes all became walking proof. You could feel it in their silence. You could see it in the way they trained, the way they handled failure, the way they never asked for sympathy, applause, or permission. That's identity, not the costume version, the earned version, the permanent version. And when you've earned it, you stop trying to convince anyone. You stop trying to perform. You just wake up and execute. You just live it. Not because someone's watching, not because you want approval, but because it's who you are now. Not a version you became when it's convenient, but the version you became when it was hardest to stay true. That's why the few rise. Because they shed the illusion early. Because they chose discomfort over deceit. Because they traded borrowed identities for earned ones. And because they stopped saying what they were and started being it. Every day. With no noise. With no audience. Just truth, grit, and relentless follow-through. No noise, no audience, just force of will practiced so many times it becomes indistinguishable from instinct. And that's the terrifying part for most. When silence arrives, they have nothing left to lean on. No compliments, no hashtags, no borrowed momentum from others clapping for effort. All that remains is the confrontation between desire and reality. And reality never compromises. Reality demands consistency, not proclamations. It's the graveyard for those who believed intention alone could carry them through fatigue, doubt, and discomfort. But discomfort is exactly where transformation starts, right where most turn back, stall out, or disappear into yet another mental rerun of what they should have done. They thought change was a decision. It's not. Change is a chain reaction of disciplined behavior repeated across months, not minutes. They assumed they could tweak a few patterns and become unstoppable, but becoming anything powerful requires a level of mental violence against distraction, softness, hesitation, laziness that they've never prepared for. So they buckle. They always do. They make plans that feel bold, yet refuse to do what bold requires. They want elevation without friction. They want progress without pressure. They crave next-level results, but live like they're stuck in warm-up mode, always adjusting, never attacking. And this is why most remain stuck in cycles. They confuse motion with momentum. They mistake researching with commitment. They obsess over systems while avoiding sacrifice. The truth is simple but vicious. No evolution exists without stripping everything that makes mediocrity comfortable. But the masses don't want to strip anything. They want to add. Add motivation, add hacks, add coaches, add apps, add shortcuts. But real movement doesn't start with addition. It starts with destruction, breaking comfort, burning excuses, killing distraction, destroying the version of yourself that negotiated with pain instead of mastering it. Execution starts when every excuse dies and there's nothing left to do but advance. No more waiting, no more over-planning, just brutal, inconvenient repetition of what works. That's what separates finishers from starters. Finishers aren't smarter, they aren't luckier, they simply act faster, longer, harder, without applause, without inspiration, and especially without needing things to feel perfect. Starters look for ideal moments. Finishers create them through discipline, not mood. One moves in spite of feelings, the other waits for them. One becomes resilient, the other becomes forgotten. Every day wasted negotiating with hesitation is a day that could have been part of the compound effect. The law of momentum doesn't reward occasional intensity, it rewards chronic consistency. But chronic anything requires identity, grit, and clarity. Not emotional noise, not peak motivation, not bursts of temporary courage, just the kind of methodical execution that numbs your doubts over time. Because the repetitions become undeniable. Not because you feel like doing it, but because it's no longer up for discussion. It's just what gets done, regardless of mood, regardless of chaos, regardless of everything trying to derail you. That level of discipline doesn't emerge by accident. It comes from obsession. A deliberate decision to stop operating at the same frequency as the crowd. A violent rejection of average, not in speech, but in structure. Because most people keep trying to win using the mindset that built their losses. They bring emotional baggage into their routines. They drag comfort into war. They wear ambition like an accessory but live like tourists, afraid to commit, afraid to bleed, afraid to risk the comfort they've grown addicted to. But there's no elevation in preservation. There's only stagnation. What builds real capability is emotional detachment from the noise. If you let your routines be governed by how you feel, then you'll always be controlled by volatility. Real progress comes when you detach behavior from emotion. You don't go hard because you're excited. You go hard because it's the only language your future respects. You don't prep meals, train, focus, and grind because it's trendy. You do it because the version of yourself you hate can't survive under that kind of relentless execution. And until your life becomes that execution without loopholes, or lifelines, you're still just circling potential, not actualizing it. Too many chase outcomes while fearing the grind required to earn them. They want to look like they've put in the hours without actually living the hours. They want to feel proud without sacrificing. They want to feel tough without doing tough things. That contradiction keeps them average. They say they're different, but their schedule looks identical to the same crowd they claim to be above. And results don't lie. You can't hide behind volume when there's no intensity. You can't hide behind effort when there's no precision. You can't hide behind passion when there's no structure. The top 1% didn't get there by feeling special. They got there by doing what needed to be done when it was most tempting not to. That's the real battleground. When it's raining, when you're sore, when motivation is absent, when the world gives you every reason to pull back and you choose not to. You tighten your schedule. You stay lethal in the face of fatigue. You deny every voice telling you to take it easy, and you don't tell anyone about it. Because if you have time to broadcast your grind, you're not deep enough in it. The elite don't announce effort, they weaponize it. Everyone wants to be remembered. Nobody wants to be ignored. But the harsh truth? The ones remembered are the ones willing to disappear long enough to construct something worth remembering. That means isolation. That means repetition. That means routines so locked in, they feel like war plans. That means being brutal with distractions, surgical with your time, violent with your focus. Because life doesn't care what you say you deserve. It only reflects what you've built. No one's handing you recognition. You have to earn attention through execution so extreme it can't be overlooked. Every excuse you entertain is another brick sealing off your potential. Every soft decision reinforces the weak version of you trying to survive inside discipline. And that version has to die. Every time you let it breathe, you lose ground. You fall back into patterns. You become the same person that tried last year and failed. You become the person who starts things without finishing, who posts goals and never delivers, who talks big and lives small. And if that's who you want to be, just keep waiting for the right moment. Just keep hoping the work feels easier someday. Just keep dreaming. But if you're done dreaming, start doing. Start waking up with a plan that doesn't bend to emotion. Start treating your time like your life depends on it, because it does. Every hour wasted in softness is an hour stolen from the future you were built to live. No one's going to drag you into excellence. No one's going to force you to become something remarkable. That's on you. It always has been. It always will be. And that's the truth most avoid, because it's easier to believe the universe is unfair than to admit they've been lazy. There's nothing special about the people at the top. They're just sick of mediocrity, sick of negotiating with themselves, sick of pretending. So they did what most never will. They executed relentlessly, not occasionally, not emotionally, not when it felt good. Always. They buried distraction. They killed hesitation. They operated with intensity most can't comprehend. And now they live what most only wish they could. That's the price. That's the formula. And it's available to anyone, but only claimed by the few who are willing to silence the world and work with blood in their mouth and fire in their chest. Blood in their mouth and fire in their chest. That's the level most will never touch. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They live in avoidance, not adversity. The second things sting, they soften. The moment discomfort arrives, they detour. Every inch of resistance feels like a signal to retreat rather than an opportunity to advance. But champions understand something different. They see resistance as confirmation that they're pushing in the right direction. They feel pain and lean harder. They meet barriers and break through, not with words, not with noise, but with execution so ruthless it doesn't need an audience. The majority, though, can't even imagine that mindset. They're caught in loops. Wake up, scroll, talk, complain, pretend, sleep, repeat. They're locked in patterns that feel familiar but breed decay. Every missed chance gets rationalized. Every skipped rep gets justified. Every lazy day is framed as self-care. They've romanticized quitting. They've spiritualized mediocrity. They've polished their avoidance with philosophies that sound deep but are just excuses wrapped in complex vocabulary. Growth doesn't come dressed in comfort. Progress doesn't show up with soft hands. The next level has no patience for your explanations. It only responds to relentless, cold, mechanical effort. People want progress without process. They want outcomes without ownership. They chase dreams on autopilot and wonder why they stay grounded. You'll never rise until you take full accountability. Not partial, not conditional, not selective. All of it. Every missed session, every poor decision, every moment wasted. It's all yours. Until you own every result, you'll keep outsourcing responsibility to luck, timing, or some external factor you think you can't control. That's why the same people stay stuck. They've built their lives around deflection. Nothing's ever their fault, but they're always frustrated. That's the loop. They want success to arrive by chance, not through conquest. There is no breakthrough without confrontation. Not with others, with yourself. Brutal honesty, unfiltered feedback, internal audits that leave no room for delusion. That's how winners evolve. They're not interested in preserving ego, they're interested in murdering it. They'd rather face the raw truth than live a decorated lie. That's why they improve at speeds that look supernatural to others. It's not genetics. It's not magic. It's just that they don't waste time lying to themselves. They don't create narratives to feel better. They don't need to be told they're doing great when they're slacking. They measure based on actions, not affirmations. That kind of mindset can't be taught through theory. It's forged in solitude, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, when it's cold, when your legs hurt, when your schedule's packed, when your motivation's gone. That's when your true baseline is revealed. Most people discover in those moments that their foundation is hollow. They've built confidence on comfort. They've constructed self-worth out of compliments. And the second those things vanish, so does their drive. But the few who've built themselves in fire don't flinch. They don't slow down. Their reasons run deeper than mood. Their actions are locked into discipline, not feelings. The gap between those who execute and those who imagine is cavernous. Not in ability, but in commitment. Everyone has potential. You activate it. The difference comes down to what you do when there's no spotlight. Do you still train? Do you still study? Do you still push your boundaries when no one's watching? Or do you slip? Do you coast? Do you tell yourself you'll get back on track tomorrow, knowing you said the same thing yesterday? That cycle destroys momentum. That's how people lose years. One rationalized compromise at a time. You don't need more motivation. You need standards. Hard lines that don't bend, principles that aren't negotiable, habits that operate regardless of weather, mood, or schedule. That's what builds momentum. Not emotion, structure. That's what separates those who ascend from those who spiral. It's never about talent. It's always about tolerance. Tolerance for monotony, for fatigue, for silence, for setbacks, for pain that isn't pretty. And most people can't stomach that kind of process. They want applause too soon. They want to be seen grinding. They want recognition for intentions. And intentions without outcomes are irrelevant. When you strip away the noise, you find out who's actually working. When you take away the cameras, the lights, the followers, the comments, you're left with discipline or nothing. That's the test. Can you push at full intensity with zero validation? Can you keep going without feedback? Can you maintain focus without recognition? That's the battlefield where the strong separate from the rest. That's where reputations are built in silence and revealed through performance. That's where the people who want it get exposed by the people who live it. Every day you hesitate, someone else is sharpening. Every hour you waste negotiating with your comfort zone, someone else is building momentum. You think you have time, but time doesn't think about you. It moves. And you're either moving with it or watching it leave you behind. Every excuse is a luxury you can't afford. Every justification is a thief wearing a friendly mask. You keep letting your standards slide, and soon you're miles away from the life you swore you were chasing. That's not bad luck. That's poor execution. And poor execution doesn't get fixed with motivation. It gets fixed with unshakable systems, with routines that aren't dependent on mood, with priorities that outlast the chaos. You don't rise by accident, you rise by design. The kind of design that survives setbacks, the kind of design that forces action even on your worst days. Because if your routine only works when everything's ideal, then you don't have a routine. You have a preference. And preference never built anything powerful. At some point, you have to decide whether this is a phase or a transformation, whether you're interested or committed, whether you're just fascinated by the idea of change or willing to pay the cost of actual growth. The price is high. It costs comfort, ease, approval, and often even relationships that don't align with your new direction. That's the toll. That's the barrier. And most aren't willing to pay it. They want to change without leaving anything behind. But real change demands subtraction before addition. You have to clear space before you can construct something real. And when that moment comes, the one where the old version of you fights to survive, you either kill it or you keep it. There's no compromise. There's no middle ground. Either the part of you that resists discipline dies, or the part of you built for domination dies. One must go because they can't coexist. You can't serve two identities. You can't be relentless on Monday and relaxed on Tuesday. You can't claim you're all in while still keeping options open. The elite burn their exit plans. They delete the backup escape routes. They move like there's no alternative because for them, there isn't. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being immovable. It's about showing up damaged but ready, tired but sharp, overwhelmed but locked in. Because the game doesn't stop when life gets hard. It keeps moving, so you move with it. You adapt, you adjust, you accelerate. And when everyone else takes their foot off the gas, you slam it down harder. That's how gaps are created. That's how distance is formed. That's how the few get so far ahead that by the time the many even realize what's happening, it's too late. By then, you're gone. Not because you were better, because you were relentless, because you made a decision and backed it with actions that didn't require applause, reward, or perfect timing. You backed it with a standard that didn't care about how you felt. You built something with your hands while everyone else used theirs to scroll, type, or complain. And now you live at a level they'll never understand because they weren't willing to suffer for it. You were. So now you know the truth. This isn't about talent, luck, or even motivation. It's about execution under pressure, consistency without recognition, and a refusal to let the weaker version of yourself breathe another day. The people at the top didn't talk their way there. They earned it through work that would break most. You can either join the endless loop of talkers or become one of the few who shut their mouth, raised their standards, and did the work. Every day is a vote. You're either building or betraying your future. Decide